So, Amrit, the registered manager sounds like a very key person. Could
Yeah.
you say more about how to find a excellent or even outstanding registered manager?
I always look for people with experience, and I think that you don't necessarily have to do that, but I think that my experience of being a franchisor and a franchisee has been that someone that has done it, worn the t-shirt, means that you're hitting the ground running. Now, that's not always possible, and that's okay. You might, you look for a mature outlook in somebody, and if they've not got any experience, but they understand it and they're really willing to try and work, wonderful. But what we find is that often finding someone experienced that might be more expensive also means that you just move faster. They understand the nuances faster. They've had that kind of management experience. They know how to have a difficult conversation with a care worker or a client. They can negotiate better often with the local authority if that's the type of service that you're operating. We don't tend to do a lot of that, frankly, at Walfinch. We're much more of a kind of private premium provider. But having someone with experience means that if you have not got experience within the sector yourself, means that you're sort of buying in that experience. And I often look at, I like that with my whole team. So if I think about my support team, I'm always looking for people that have really done it before. They've helped, because you almost look at experienced people like they have a crystal ball, in many ways, and they often they know how a situation's going to play out because they've been in that same situation 10 different times and more. So I think that, I would say, is a really important part. There's the regulation piece. So are they NVQ Level 5, or do they have a nursing qualification? Also depends on type of service that you want to operate. If you're looking at operating a much more complex service, which I've done previously, I hired an ex-nurse who had an active PIN, and so that person really understood how to do catheters, suction, tracheotomy, or whatever that kind of the complex work was, or end-of-life care. They had a lot of experience around that sort of piece on it. And if you're not going to find someone super experienced, that's okay. But what I would then suggest is then, let's really put in a lot of support for this person. Let's put in some coaching support maybe. So if you're working with a franchise, maybe that franchise support person can spend some one-to-one time with that registered manager and so on. So one of the things that we do at Walfinch is we actually get the registered managers together on a really frequent basis, online and offline, and create workshops and a forum for them, because it keeps them sort of really in tune with us as a brand and the values, and it takes it really past that local branch. Because much like business owners, it's a very lonely job being a managing director, but it's also quite a lonely job being a registered manager. So having that camaraderie built in is quite nice.
Where would I find a registered manager?
At the end of a rainbow with a golden bucket.
And a unicorn.
Yeah, a unicorn, yeah. No, so there's lots of different things. One of the things that I often say is really early doors, start speaking to lots of different recruitment consultants, and we've got a panel of consultants that we work with, and I think that's really one of the things that I'd say, straight off the bat. Let's speak to 5 different consultants, super active, and get lots of ads out. The other thing is putting adverts out or on Indeed and so on and so forth, LinkedIn, and seeing, well, okay, can I find someone active on LinkedIn? And then the other thing is, actually just going through and going to local care events and speaking to registered managers there and asking registered managers for referrals. And do you have a friend? Do you know anyone? And there's often local associations that you can start chiming into, or speaking to the local authority and seeing, when do you next have a care event? And often there'll be something on in the next quarter that you can go along to and really start, I'm all about shoe leather. I'm all about taking action. And so, yes, I'll go to the consultants and so on, but I'm all about getting out there, and it's all belly to belly, and it's relationships and really understanding that. And then once you've found a registered manager, I would just carry on trying to build relationships with other registered managers. It's that kind of old concept of building a bench and saying, well, okay, are there other people that I know that might be appropriate for me in 3 years' time? Because the person I've got right now is wonderful for a startup business, but maybe they're not right for that much more established business. And so I think it's a really lovely thing to start naturally doing, keeping relationships alive and building benches. And it's something I would say for all job roles, certainly senior job roles, to kind of always be speaking to people and just keeping relationships there. One of the things that I found as a franchisee myself was that it meant that I could have the bigger management conversation much more comfortably, because I wasn't afraid of that person walking out the door, which in my restaurant business, I always was. And I had a chef that walked out on a Friday night at 8 p.m. That was fun. And so it was really sort of saying, well, do I have another chef in my back pocket that might be able to help me here? Before I sold my first care business, at that point I had a leadership team of 5 people in the office, and all 5 of them had a level 5 qualification. So technically they could have all have been a registered manager. Now, only one of them would have been an appropriate registered manager, but on paper they were all able to be. And I think so coaching the rest of your team to say, hey, I want to make sure that we're sort of all there and get you kind of operating. And as a sort of standalone piece, I think for me, having a team is really important, but understanding, a lot of people come to me and say, I don't know why my RM or my team doesn't want my vision, and I can't sell them on my vision. And the thing that I always think about, and one of the things that I often do, actually I've been doing the whole of January, and I'm still I've got a few left, is I go for one-to-one walks with my management team. And it ends up being sort of 8 to 10 miles and a few hours, usually on Hampstead Heath, sometimes in the rain, ending up with a very nice lunch at the end of it. But just talking about life and understanding, yes, the work stuff and whatever, and there's that first 20-minute download of, I've got all this going on. But really trying to understand what's important to you. Where does your life end up in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years' time? And how do I help you get there? And then how do I entwine that with my vision? So our visions are together. And that way, we're both sold on a singular vision, because my thing will help you get to your thing, and therefore it's our thing, and we can carry on driving. And I think that's a really important part when you are recruiting somebody, when you employ somebody, to understand what do they want out of life. Let's get to know them. I had a one-to-one recently with a team member, and we're digging into how they're interested in having children in the next couple of years, and therefore they're changing car now and looking at the next house. And I'm like, well, how do I help you with that? What can I do to support with that? So you need other people around you to take some steam off then, so that you could be an active parent, and so on and so forth. And it's all of that, and saying, well, how do I help you pre-plan? Therefore, we need to build this section of the business up so that we can afford to get more people in your team, and so on. So it's all of that thinking. And so therefore, that person's engaged in building that part of the business. I'm engaged in building that part of the business. Our reasons are slightly different, but the end goal is the same.